Bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Hello and welcome to The Briefing. I'm Esther McVeigh and here's what's coming up on the next hour. The Bank of England is expected to raise interest rates any moment now, but what does that mean for us? I'll talk with Tory grandee John Redwood about the state of our economy and why he thinks Liz Truss is the right person to lead us. And social care is in crisis. I'll talk to Labour MP Clive Betts about a new report which says an injection of cash is essential to prevent the sector from collapsing. And Mayor Patrick has been banned from his local pub in Devon where he was partial to a pint of Guinness. We'll meet him. And by the way, he's the one on the left. And locals are outraged at how he's being treated. Give me your political briefings. Yes, send me your views and opinions by emailing gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet me at gbnews.
Good afternoon. It's just gone at midday. I'm Simon Pusey in the GB newsroom. Interest rates have gone up for the sixth time in a row. The interest rate currently stands at 1.25%, but it has gone up to 1.75% today, the largest increase in nearly 30 years. The Bank of England has announced its decision, hoping to slow the rate of rising prices. The UK is already at its highest level of inflation in 4 decades. Ofgem has announced the energy price cap will now be updated every 3 months instead of every 6, warning customers face a very challenging winter ahead. It says the change will go some way to provide stability in the energy market, making sure customers are only paying the real cost of their energy. Ofgem boss Jonathan Brewery cites Russia's actions in Ukraine as being behind the volatile energy market, leading to a surge in gas and electricity prices. Archie Battersby's mother says she prays the High Court will do the right thing to give her son a dignified death. It's after the family have submitted an application to the High Court to move Archie to a hospice. In a statement, Holly Dance has said it would be inhumane if they are refused permission to move the 12-year-old from the Royal London Hospital into palliative care. Archie has also been in a coma since April. Speaking to GB News, Attorney General Sula Braverman called the situation tragic.
This is a very, very complex matter. Of course, the parents have the best interests of Archie at the forefront of their mind. Weighed against that are clinical considerations and medical opinions. And I know that English judges will have considered this very sensitively, very thoroughly, and have reached the right decision.
In the latest hustings for the Conservative leadership race, Rishi Sunak once again attacked Liz Truss's economic policies. The Foreign Secretary reiterated her promises to cut tax and grow the economy without driving prices higher. However, the former Chancellor warned against cutting taxes before inflation is brought under control. Latest polling shows Mr Sunak is trailing behind his rival, but he insisted he was hopeful.
Apply that same urgency, that same energy, that same grip and radicalism to tackling all of our problems, reforming public services, growing the economy, tackling migration, putting in practice those conservative values of hard work, of aspiration, of hope that we all hold dear to build a better Britain. But more than that, I promise you all this. I will give you my everything, my heart and my soul, everything I've got.
Rishi Sunak there. Meanwhile, Ms Truss is also coming under renewed pressure to make good on a promise she reportedly made to a group of war widows to restore their pension payments. A change in the law in 2015 means war widows who remarry no longer lose their £7,000 a year payment, but around 300 service widows who married before 2015 have not had their widow's pension restored. One of the widows, Margaret Allen, is calling on Ms Truss to fulfil her commitment.
I would ask her to stand by that statement and resolve this now. It's almost 7 years we have been campaigning to get this corrected. All we're asking for is parity with our peers. We've struggled, we've been traumatised and stressed for 7 years. Enough is enough.
Tensions are escalating between the US and China, with Beijing staging its largest military exercise near Taiwan so far. It includes live ammunition drills and more than a dozen warplanes in the waters surrounding the region. China is accusing the US of playing with fire after House Speaker Nancy Pelosi met with Taiwan's president yesterday. She's the most senior US politician to visit that country in 25 years. Taiwan is a self-governing democracy that China considers part of its territory. And the amount of coral growth at Australia's Great Barrier Reef has reached record levels. Researchers say it's the most coral cover they've seen in 36 years, but experts warn it's still vulnerable to threats. They say mass bleaching and climate change could quickly unravel the progress made, even though it is a resilient system.
But as of today, it's still a fantastic place. It's still vibrant and it's still kicking. And it really gives us hope that if we can reduce carbon emissions, and we can really give the reef, the best chance to maintain its natural beauty into the future.
This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now it's back to the briefing.
Hello again. It's just coming up to 6 minutes past 12, and the Bank of England has just raised the interest rate by 0.5% to 1.75%. That's the biggest rise for 27 years. So let's cross now to our national reporter, Paul Hawkins, who is at the Bank of England. Hello there, Paul. So can you tell me, how badly then is this going to affect people, and when will they feel the impact of this change?
Right, you'll see let's just give you some figures, Esther. So there are 9 million mortgages in the UK. 3/4 of them are on fixed rate terms, so they're not going to see a change in their monthly mortgage repayment straight away. But if you're on a standard rate variable mortgage, say it's £250,000 over 25 years, you're looking at an increase in your monthly mortgage payments of £74 a month. That's £888 a year. Now, if you're on a tracker mortgage as well, then you'll also see an increase in your monthly mortgage repayment. So that's about 1.8 million mortgages that will be affected almost immediately by this increase in the bank rate, it's big. I mean, at the start of the pandemic, we had interest rates at a low of 0.1%. This is the 6th consecutive rise. We're now at 1.75%. That's the biggest increase for 27 years. Just to give you some other figures that the Bank of England has announced, because it doesn't just announce an interest rate rise, it also gives its forecast for the economy, which are really important. It predicts that inflation will rise to 13%, and it's predicting a recession starting this year, lasting as long as the financial crisis. So that's 5 quarters and as deep as the 1990s. It's predicting that the dual fuel energy bill on average will reach £3,500, just under £300 a month this winter. That's 3 times what it was a year ago, and it's predicting inflation will still be above 9%. It's 9.4% at the moment. They're saying it will still be above 9% this time next year. Now, if those figures are correct, and remember they're forecasts, they're open, they're subjective, economists will have differing opinions, but if those forecasts are correct, then the figures that the current prime ministerial candidates are having their debates around, that debate will have to change, those financial policies, because that effectively wipes out that £30 billion of fiscal headroom that Liz Truss was basing her tax cuts on. So she's going to have to revise her numbers. Rishi Sunak's going to have to revise his numbers. And there's going to be a new debate, which some might say is very welcome, given the kind of slightly repetitive nature of the debates at the moment, but the numbers have changed if you believe the Bank of England forecast. Hey, look, Liz Truss can say, look, Patrick Minford says, the other economist, that the numbers are wrong, and so she can stick with the figures she's got. But at the moment, that's what the Bank of England is forecasting.
Right, and we'll all be checking our figures and checking our bank accounts with, as you say, the changes in fuel and the changes with everything else. So can you explain, Paul, when everybody's struggling so much, why has the bank then increased the interest rates today?
Right, I'll try and make this as simple as possible. It's about inflation. We know that's the general rate of price increases. At the moment, it's sky high. The very basic thinking is that if you increase interest rates and you increase mortgage repayments, then that takes money out of our pockets. We've got to put more onto mortgage repayments, which means we spend less, which means it doesn't fuel inflation in the economy because we're not going out and we're not spending in the shops. Now, some people say that thinking is not very sound with this kind of inflation, right? That's based on 1980s inflation, which was demand driven. We all went out and spent loads in the shops. It drove up the price of everything, and so interest rates had to go up, so we took money out of our pockets. This is supply side inflation, some would argue. So a lack of supply of energy, a lack of supply of fuel, a lack of supply of food means the cost of all that stuff has gone sky high, and so taking money out of people's pockets isn't going to make much of a difference. This is a supply side problem. You need to increase the amount of energy that's available, you need to increase the amount of food, you need to increase the amount of oil that's available so that the price at the pumps comes down. So there is some thinking that it's different. The other thing to mention is that the Bank of England is doing this because of what they call a wage price spiral, the risk of that happening. So when we think that prices are going to be baked in for a long time, that they're going to be high, we go to our employer and we ask for a wage increase, right? Now, that means that if that employer gives you that wage increase, that's a business cost for them, so they put their prices up. So then we go back to the employer and we say, look, prices are going up, and so you get stuck in a wage price spiral. Now, some people think because we're not as unionised as we were in the 1980s, there isn't that much of a risk of that happening, and so really interest rates need to stay where they are for now. So there is some dispute. There is some people who think that what the Bank of England doing isn't correct, but that's the thinking in the Bank of England. It's what a lot of central banks around the world, Federal Reserve, the European Central Bank, that's what a lot of them are doing. Some people say it's old school thinking, but that's the reason why they're doing it, because they want to tackle inflation. They want to send out a message that, look, we're in control of this situation and prices aren't going to be high for too long.
Paul, thank you very much indeed for bringing us the latest news and that clear explanation you've just given. Right, let's talk now to Conservative MP Sir John Redwood, who's held many senior positions in the party and was an investment analyst. John, hello, John Redwood.
Hello, John Redwood.
So what's your reaction to those interest rate rises?
Well, the danger is that the bank will lurch from having been far too accommodating and printing far too much money, which is part of the reason we have the inflation, to doing too much too late. I see from their forecasts, which have just come out, they are now expecting the UK to enter recession, and they are expecting unemployment to be going up. This is bad news, and they've got to try and get the balance right after the inflation mistakes of the last couple of years. So they've got to be conscious that if they slow the economy too much, we have a nasty recession, and they do far too much to control inflation by that means. Whereas if they didn't do enough, then clearly the inflation might last for longer. But I would like to have heard rather more from them about just how much they've done already, because they've made a huge change to money policy compared with last year, when they were still creating lots of money and buying lots of bonds. And I see today they're now talking about actually selling some of those bonds on top of the interest rate rises. So this is a very substantial monetary tightening we're talking about, and we are going to feel it in falling output.
Do you think this is too much all at once?
Well, I think they've done more than enough to deal with the inflation problem that reflects past problems. As they rightly say, if the energy price situation gets worse, then the economic outlook deteriorates, or if we're somewhere near the peak of the energy prices, then we get some benefit from that. They're very sure that they are going to be well on top of inflation by this strategy, because they're talking about inflation being back at 2% in a couple of years' time. I don't think they thought enough about how they and the Treasury together can do a bit more to ease the squeeze which is occurring, which is going to lead to this slowdown and recession they're now forecasting.
So, John, does this not show that it's actually interest rates that are the most important thing rather than the tax rate changes? Are you a supporter of Liz Truss who's trying to do that?
Well, I think Liz Truss is exactly right that we need to ease the squeeze a bit more because the squeeze is going to be very fierce from this autumn onwards once the one-off payments that Rishi Sunak put in place have been paid out. And so I think Liz is quite right to say that we need to do a bit more so that people have got a bit more spending power against all these big price rises, and the national insurance tax rise cancellation would help with that. And I think she's right to look at the energy taxes again. And the more you can do to at least temporarily cut the taxes on energy, the more you reduce the intense squeeze which this energy price shock is adding to the other troubles.
Now, I know you will have read it because you're up at the crack of dawn and you read all the papers first thing. I know that about you. Nigel Lawson has said today that he reflects on the mistaken belief that politicians can tinker with the sort of tax and fiscal tools, and that's not going to help inflation. So he sort of doesn't back Liz Truss. He would be backing Rishi Sunak.
No, I'm clearly backing Liz Truss because I do think that a big mistake was made on monetary policy by the Bank and the Treasury last year. I think they carried on printing money for too long and keeping longer-term interest rates very low by buying all those bonds. But they didn't agree at the time. They now are making this huge adjustment. And again, I must stress that this is a very big change of money policy we've now seen this year, from a very loose money policy to a much, much tighter policy. And it's coinciding with this big shock to everybody's living standards from the huge surge in gas prices and petrol and diesel prices. So I do think more needs to be done. I think Liz Truss represents the change we need in thinking, because we do know that the old Treasury and bank thinking landed us in this situation with a very high inflation. It's true that same mistakes were made in America and in the European Union. But these mistakes weren't made everywhere in the world, and we need to learn from that.
John, you say that she's a change candidate, but actually she's been the continuation candidate and supporting Boris. So which one is it, continuation or change, and which one do you want?
I'm sorry, Esther, I'm not hearing any of your questions at all. The line is very bad, and so...
Okay. You're just saying that Liz is the change candidate, but really she was saying she's the continuation candidate too. She's supported Boris right the way through and everybody else who's been there. So is she for change? Is she for continuation? And what would you want her to be?
Well, I think the position on Liz Truss is that she's been a loyal member of Boris's team, but within the privacy of government, as I understand it, and we can now read in the press, she was very unhappy about the national insurance increase, which I think was an economic mistake, an even bigger political mistake. I don't think we should be tearing up our strong manifesto pledges on tax. And we know that she has been a voice for easing the squeeze a bit more, which again, I think is a very necessary policy. But I wouldn't criticise someone for staying in the government and trying to do the best they can, because clearly you have a range of people and views in the cabinet, and it's best if they can stay together and argue it through each time, and they'll win some and they'll lose some.
John, going through all your tweets, you seem to write a lot more about Rishi. So what I'm wondering is are you voting for Liz, or are you just voting against Rishi?
No, I'm voting for Liz. I think she's shown over the years that she's been a very strong enthusiast of free enterprise and greater economic freedoms. That's what I think will make the economy go better and get us more growth. I think she's right to be growth-oriented and more optimistic. I know it's difficult being optimistic at a time when you've got a really bad cost of living squeeze, and now you've got a mortgage squeeze and a Bank of England money squeeze. But we need some optimism to get us through. We need sensible optimism, and we need policies to reinforce an optimistic direction. So that's why I'm backing Liz, and I certainly wasn't getting that from Rishi.
John Redwood, thank you very much indeed for joining us today. I like that, ending on an optimistic note. Well, our political correspondent Tom Harwood is here. Are you optimistic? Who should be optimistic? Liz at the moment seems good again on the polls that's coming through.
Well, yes, the polls seem to be relatively consistent now. We saw a survey from Conservative Home, the website yesterday, of their readers, which is usually fairly accurate in these senses, and that's echoing what YouGov has been saying, and that's a substantial lead for Liz Truss. Now, she might feel optimistic about winning the premiership. However, whoever wins the premiership can't feel that optimistic about the economy they are inheriting. Of course, these numbers that we're hearing today, the 13% inflation expectations, 5 consecutive quarters of recession in this country. These are stark figures, and I wonder how much more seriously the debate will now change. I think we're not going to hear so much about what earrings and what shoes people are wearing now, and we're really, this could be the start of a very serious, level-headed conversation in this leadership race, because it's very clear now that the country is sailing into the schools this winter, and potentially what both of these candidates are saying in terms of their fiscal offering, in terms of the tax reductions, they might seem more marginal now, given the scale of the crisis.
And I did bring this up with John Redwood, but he wasn't moving from his support for Liz. But Nigel Lawson has come out for Rishi, and what he's saying is this idea that you think you can tinker around with the tax isn't going to be what's really going to solve the inflation problem.
Yeah,
he's saying that it's actually Rishi who understands sort of Thatcherite policies.
Yes, and he makes the point of the 1972 budget. Conservative Chancellor at the time was received as a very popular budget. It had a lot of giveaways in it, but actually that spurred forward inflation, ushered in a Labour government in 1974 and all of the crises that then beset the United Kingdom. To some extent, there are some parallels you can draw there, but there are also some big differences, not least the fact that there's an independent Bank of England now. So the fact that the government isn't in charge of interest rate policy, and that can offset a looser fiscal policy, as we're seeing today, a tighter monetary policy, could well be the brake to that sort of inflation. And then there's the other issue in terms of a tax cut is different from government department spending rises. To some extent, you get natural fiscal consolidation when you have inflation. If you don't increase the spend of all of these departments have to spend more to deliver the same amount of services, and to some extent that's almost like it's a spending reduction. So you get that sort of sense of fiscal consolidation by just sitting on your hands. So I think there are some differences between the 1972 example and the 2022 example, although it is significant that Nigel Lawson, Margaret Thatcher's longest-serving Chancellor, has been saying this morning.
And he would have looked at the differences as well. But do you think as well the media now is starting to dig into the two candidates' sort of backgrounds? I know they've looked at a fundraiser that Liz had of late and said, why wasn't this declared? Do you think it's going to get a bit dirtier as we go on in the next couple of weeks?
Well,
quick answer, Tom.
It's the next couple of days that really matter, because we know now that ballots land at the start of next week. It's been delayed by a week.
But some are coming through now, I hear. Some are coming through.
Trickling through now. We'll get the deluge over the next few days, and people are expected to vote pretty much as soon as they get them. So this is where the real campaigning matters.
Tom, as always, thank you very much indeed. And in just a moment, the Mirror's Kevin Maguire joins me to talk about the twists and turns in the battle for our next Prime Minister. And the Mayor of Cockington in Devon has been banned from his local pub. Here he is, Patrick the Pony. We'll hear his story from the horse's mouth back in a moment.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Welcome back. It's almost 12:25. Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak are on a mad dash around the country trying to hoover up the votes of 160,000 or so Conservative Party members who will choose our next Prime Minister. As yet another poll has given Liz Truss a huge lead. Let's talk now with Kevin Maguire, Associate Editor of the Daily Mirror. Hi there, Kevin. So, who do you think's running the best campaign?
Well, I think it's got to be said, Esther, it'll be Liz Truss because she seems to be out in front. All the polls are showing that. Rishi Sunak, his team are saying, well, private returns from canvassing show he's doing better than is thought, but there's no evidence of that. And she's running as the change candidate. You were pushing John Redwood, and he was a bit reluctant to answer earlier. Is she change or is she continuity? Because, of course, she's politically the Boris Johnson continuity candidate, but economically, she wants a break from Rishi Sunak, who was the Chancellor until very recent, by offering tax cuts and spending, which must, I think the Times today say total £80 billion. How she's going to find the money, how she's going to do that, I do not know. And I'm now trying to weigh up, as I'm sure Truss and Sunak are, what today's Bank of England announcement will mean for their campaigns, because the outlook is really, really grim. When inflation, 9.4% now, is going to hit 13.3% in October, the highest since 1990. We're going to go back into recession. 15 months, not just of low growth, it's going to be negative growth. And then on top of that, you've got interest rates up by the biggest increase for 27 years, going up to 1.75%, another 0.5%. This is a grim outlook and a real cost of living squeeze. Who will that benefit? Will it benefit Liz Truss, who is offering big tax cuts now and saying change, or will it benefit Rishi Sunak, who's going to say steady as she goes? You were mentioning Nigel Lawson, considered in Conservative circles, a very successful Chancellor in the Thatcher era. I kind of differ on that, but nevertheless, in Conservative circles, he is considered to be successful. He's backing Sunak. Can Sunak say, look, I'm the adult, I know how to handle this, I've been at the Treasury, I was there through the COVID crisis, I'll get us through this crisis, which is sparked in many ways by Putin's unprovoked invasion of Ukraine and what that did for global food and fuel prices. And I just wonder if it will help Sunak more than it will Truss.
And that's why, I guess, I asked, who do you think's been running the best campaign? Because so far you'd definitely say Liz, but this could be a turning moment when people are looking for something completely different. So it could be a campaign, as it were, of two halves. So let me ask you, who do you think the Labour Party would want to be the leader of the Conservative Party? Who do you think they've got a better chance of beating at the next general election?
Liz Truss. Undoubtedly, I've had so many conversations with Labour MPs, shadow cabinet members, people in the office and around Keir Starmer, and they all think Liz Truss is the most beatable because she's a poor debater. They wonder if she really has a thought out, worked out plan. We saw earlier this week on public service pay how she was essentially, for a while, although she denied it for a while, she was proposing cuts in the earnings of nurses, teachers, police officers, in the red wall seats of England's north and the Midlands, out in the west, in Wales and Scotland, where her writ would rule as Prime Minister, because, of course, devolution changes a bit. And they think a lot of mistakes like that will come through. And also, she will not be able to play the Brexit card against Keir Starmer. Keir Starmer, as you know, was well against Brexit. He was enthusiastically wanting the UK to stay in the European Union. Well, so was Liz Truss. Now, she says she's changed her mind. He's changed his mind in so much as he says, I now accept the referendum decision. I'm not going to reopen that. I've got to make Brexit work. They can't attack him. They can't attack him on that now because they would have, the Conservative Party, would have a leader in a similar position. So now, Labour want Liz Truss, definitely. They think Rishi Sunak is also beatable because of his record, but they think he's a trickier and more difficult opponent than Truss.
Isn't that interesting that somebody like John Redd was talking about he wanted sort of optimism and change and these sort of bold moves, but you're saying the complete opposite, that the Labour Party would fear this more, I don't know, diligent, conscientious Rishi Sunak?
Yeah, well, the reason they think, yes, change, we need change in the UK. Undoubtedly, we need change. And you want change that is both radical and reassuring, that you can see significant differences, but at the same time, you don't feel threatened. And Labour calculate that Truss will be all over the place. She'll be a puppet with her strings pulled by so many other people that she'll get into a real tangle, while Sunak has a record they can put around his neck, particularly that 1.25% increase in national insurance contributions for both employees and employers when the economy is going down. The only major economy to increase taxation at such a time. But they just think he comes across better debating. When he's interviewed, he's a more reassuring figure than Liz Truss. That's what they do, yeah. People want change, but what change do you want? Jeremy Corbyn offered change in 2019 and got hammered. So change itself isn't always the answer. It's what is that change? Do you think the person is competent? Do you buy into it? And the next election is going to be the general election, whenever it is, and it could be as late as January 2025. When it comes, it's going to be difficult for the Conservatives because it's going to be a fifth general election at which they will be looking to win power. They'll have been in between 12 and 15 years. You take hits. And I remember one Conservative minister during the great financial crash of 2007-8. Essentially started in the US, Britain got hit very hard, happened on Gordon Brown's watch. And an official in the Treasury discussing with this Conservative minister said, well, you know it wasn't created by us. This is blown in from abroad. And this Conservative minister said, it doesn't matter. It's happened on your watch. You will take the blame. And I think that's what's going to happen now with the economy, because a lot of these current pressures, I'll acknowledge, are coming from abroad.
Kevin, do you think there is any possibility that Labour can win? Say it's, as you say, 2024, 2025. I mean, is Keir Starmer really not the Neil Kinnock? Will it not be a rerun of 1992? Sort of, he's uncharismatic and they've got like 163 seats to overturn thereabouts.
Yeah, it could be. Could be. You're right, Esther. That's a possibility. But I think Labour winning an overall majority is very, very unlikely, and I think beyond them because they lost so many seats in Scotland to the SNP. But Labour can calculate scenarios where they emerge as the biggest party, and the Conservatives lose seats in, yes, some of the red wall seats in the north and Midlands of England, but also some seats in the south to the Liberal Democrats. And you get this pincer movement, which we saw in the recent by-elections in Tiverton and Honiton, which was taken by the Liberal Democrats, and Wakefield fell to Labour at the same day up in West Yorkshire. And you get this pincer movement against the Conservative Party. Now, that 80-seat majority, 40 seats go, it's gone. You begin to get 50 and 60 seats going, and Labour could emerge as the biggest party. But now I can't see an overall Labour majority, but I can see Labour emerging as the biggest party. I'm not saying it'll happen. There's many twists and turns ahead, but I think there's a real possibility of it now.
Thank you very much indeed for your great insight. Thank you. So, social care urgently needs more funding and a long-term plan, according to a new cross-party report from MPs. I'll talk to Labour MP Clive Betts next. He's chair of the committee who produced the report. And we bring you the Mayor of Cockington in Devon, who's just been banned from his local pub. And as you can see, he is in fact a pony by the name of Patrick. But first, here's the news.
Hello, it's 12:34. I'm Simon Pusey in the GB newsroom. The Bank of England has just raised its interest rate from 1.25% to 1.75%. It's the highest level since January 2009 and the largest increase in nearly 30 years. The bank says consumer prices index inflation is expected to peak at 13.3% in October, the highest level since 1980. The UK is already at its highest level of inflation in 4 decades. Ofgem has announced the energy price cap will now be updated every 3 months instead of every 6, warning customers face a very challenging winter ahead. It says the change will go some way to provide what they're calling stability in the energy market, making sure customers are only paying the real cost of their energy. Archie Battersby's mother says she prays the High Court will do the right thing to give her son a dignified death. Holly Dance says it would be inhumane if they are refused permission to move 12-year-old Archie from the Royal London Hospital into palliative care. Archie has been in a coma since April. In the latest hustings for the Conservative leadership race, Rishi Sunak again attacked Liz Truss's economic policies. The Foreign Secretary reiterated her promise to cut tax and grow the economy without driving prices higher. However, the former Chancellor warned against cutting taxes before inflation is brought under control. They face each other again later today in a televised debate. TV, online and DAB Plus radio, this is GB News. Now it's back to the briefing with Esther.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Welcome back to The Briefing. Now, the social care sector is in crisis with huge numbers of unfilled vacancies and carers often earning less than they would if they worked in a supermarket. With an ageing population, the pressures are only set to get worse. And it has a severe knock-on effect on the NHS. Today, a cross-party report by the Levelling Up Housing and Communities Committee calls for an immediate injection of funding and a long-term plan. Joining me now is the committee chair, Labour MP Clive Betts. Hello, Clive. So tell us about these crises, the key bits of your report.
Yes, Esther, thanks for having me on. Key bits are a shortage of funding for councils to commission social care. They buy care from care companies who provide residential care and domiciliary care. So there's a shortage there. Councils are having to cut back on other services to give social care a priority. There are many people, 1.5 million, according to Age Concern, who would have got social care 10 years ago, who, because the criteria have been tightened, don't get it now. There's a workforce problem, a shortage of people, because, as you say, you can earn as much money in the supermarket as you can in social care. Many people get a job and then leave within a year. Many are on 0-hour contracts, and there's no long-term plan to grow the workforce and properly reward them.
Yeah, and the staffing pressures are acute, and I'd say particularly so as well after the mandation of the COVID vaccine. We saw tens of thousands of people leaving the service as well. So you've got an array of pressures there on staffing. So how are we going to solve those problems?
Well, I think it is a matter of pay for a start. I mean, there are many people working social care, and we should commend them and really laud their efforts, who do it for the love of the job, but they don't do it for the pay, do they? I think we've got to recognise that as the population gets older, more people are going to need care. It's right that as a society we should give people the care that they need in their old age, or people with disabilities as well. Then we're simply going to have to pay people more to come into social care. We're going to have to train them better. We're going to have to reward them when we stay in the sector for a long period of time. And we heard stories in our report of people who've been working 5 years or more in the care sector that were getting 50 pence more per hour than when they started. That's not right either. All these things need resolution. They need money, of course, but without it, we're going to have a sector which just deteriorates and goes into further decline.
And where is this extra money going to come from? I was talking to Kevin Maguire before, and he was saying that the Labour Party didn't agree with the increase in national insurance contribution, but that was going to social care. So if it's not that, and Labour would want to see a reversal of that, you might say that isn't the case. Where is the extra money going to come from now?
Well, first of all, the money in the levy, as currently constituted, isn't going to social care to deal with this gap in funding that exists. It's doing certain things, like stopping the situation where people had to lose their total assets from the sale of their home to pay for their care. But it's not addressing the shortage that we've got at all. Most of it's going to the NHS, badly needed in the NHS, but that's where it's going. We produced a report some years ago, jointly with the Health and Social Care Committee, talking about a social care precept. Yes, it would have been a levy of some kind, but it would have been geared more towards people on higher incomes, people with unearned income, and a percentage of people's assets when they die. So a variety of different things. But in the end, of course, some of it will have to come from general taxation. Do we as a nation think it's important to look after our elderly population? In the later years of their life? Of course we must do. That's something that a civilised society should do. And just in passing, not tongue-in-cheek, no, because it's a serious issue. Liz Truss seems to have got a big war chest somewhere. Shouldn't we spend at least a bit of that on help for the elderly, help for people with disabilities? Help actually, which will stop people getting into hospital if you go and give them the basic care they need at home in the first place.
And you'll no doubt share my concern with the rise in energy costs and energy bills.
Absolutely.
Care homes have their heating on for the elderly. So I'm guessing this is yet another pressure that will be on those care homes.
Absolutely. Already you starting to recognise that, if you've got a care home with elderly people in it, then you're going to have the heating probably turn slightly higher than other people's housing for pretty obvious reasons. So big bills there for the care companies, and many of whom are struggling already. Bills, of course, when domiciliary care workers go out and visit the people needing care, they have to drive to get there. So the cost of their petrol and fuel is going up. All those costs and all the inflationary costs that local authorities have got on top of the shortage of funding that across party and local councils are saying, this funding means we're cutting other services to pay for social care. So it really is a perfect storm. And if we have got spare resource in the Treasury, for heaven's sake, see this as a priority. There already are elderly people in hospital beds today who should be at home getting care in their own environment with their own family, instead are stuck in hospital beds because the money isn't there to pay for their care. That's a disgrace.
Clive Betts, thank you very much indeed for joining us
Thank you,
today
Esther.
and telling
Thank
us
you.
about this brand new report. But let's return to our top story, and that's the rise in the Bank of England's base rate by 0.5%. It's the biggest rise in 27 years. In the past few minutes, the bank has said it expects Britain to fall into a recession lasting longer than a year. Our national reporter explains what it means for interest rates.
Another day, another rise in the cost of living and potentially your mortgage repayments.
0.5% is enormous. It's the biggest interest rate rise since 1995, and it means just over 800,000 of us on tracker mortgages will see our monthly repayments go up straight away, while just over 1 million of us on standard rate variable mortgages could also see rises very soon.
In fact, a 0.5% increase in interest rates could add around £74 a month to a typical variable rate mortgage, or £888 a year based on a 250 grand loan with a 25-year term.
I'm very, very worried about taking out a variable rate mortgage. I know someone who did that 2 years ago and it's already gone up 3 times in that period.
Serena is 24, a first-time buyer looking to get a mortgage and a flat in London.
So it is very stressful to kind of think about the interest rate rise and what that might mean for me, who has to make a decision about whether to kind of fix a mortgage straight off the bat now or kind of take my chances and wait it out.
Has the interest rate rise and just the general increase in the cost of living made you think twice about buying your own place?
After 3 years of living at home, I saved the money, but now it's just a case of I have the money saved, but the environment I'll be buying in is just so up and down. It's making me think, do I wait a year? But who's to say the situation will be any better in a year?
So why is the Bank of England increasing interest rates? The reason is inflation. In other words, prices, which, as we know, are sky high and continuing to rise.
The bank's been very clear. They want to make sure that we don't get into what's called a wage price spiral. And that's when inflation rises, people go to their employers and they say, look, inflation's higher, I'd like a pay rise. They want people to think that inflation is under control or will come under control so that they don't go and ask for pay rises, which feeds already high inflation.
But is raising interest rates an old school method for tackling modern inflation? Some economists argue that 1980s high inflation was different to what we're experiencing now. Back then it was driven by demand. We kept spending, so prices kept rising. The inflation now is caused by a lack of supply when it comes to energy, fuel, food and labour. Plus, the workforce today is very different to what it was back then.
Right now, unionization's at about 20%. Public sector employs only about 17% of people. So that risk of a wage price spiral is a lot less likely than it was in 1980.
So, with energy bills and the cost of fuel sky high, what's the advice from the money experts?
So look at everything that you're doing. Look at where you're shopping, how you're shopping. Look at waste. Look at how you're using your home, your energy, how you're getting to work. And every little thing that you do to save money will help.
For millions of us, mostly middle and working class, the cost of living is becoming the cost of surviving.
And that's why many people think the government is going to have to help out again. The question is, who does it help? How much help does it offer? For how long? And who pays for that help? Paul Hawkins, GB News.
Now, the Mayor of Cockington in Devon has been banned from his local pub, where he was partial to a pint of Guinness. But he's not a normal mayor. Oh, no. He is, in fact, a therapy pony who works with disabled children. And many locals are outraged by the ban, as are we here at GB News. So joining me now, live from Devon, is the mayor himself and his owner, Kirk Petrakis. So, Kirk, what happened? Tell us the story.
Oh, hello there. Yes, so basically Patrick the pony is a therapy pony, and we have a interaction pen at Cockington, and it's a safe place where people can come and see Patrick and interact with him. and unfortunately we've had to take it down because of the because it needs planning, which we weren't aware of at the time, because there's lots of fences around Cockington and a lot more bigger things that doesn't have planning. So it's really upsetting. A lot of people were really upset about this.
So Patrick, the mayor, who all the local residents love, who's a therapy pony, minding his own business, supping on a bit of Guinness, and the council has come along and doesn't agree with it. So why do you think they're picking on Patrick? Is it because he's maybe so popular? Maybe they're not.
It feels like I know he's got a big social media following on the Adventures of Patrick the Pony, and a YouTube channel called Celebrity Pony, and massive all over where Patrick does. It really baffles us.
Yeah, I think we can put it all down to jealousy there. But is Patrick, because he looks very docile there, has he been drinking his Guinness already? Is he having a snooze, or can we see Patrick? Because I believe he's in his full mayoral gear, as it were. Let's have a look. Can we zoom in? Oh.
Chain. Obviously, he's not wearing it at the moment because he's lying down. Okay, and he's just style. So, if you can imagine, if we're in a hospital, the ICU kind of thing, this is how gentle and calm he is. He's just so calm-natured. He's very special to us.
I can see that. Are you cutting a little bit in and out there of signal? Is there any way that we can stand Patrick up and have a closer look at him? Can we do that, just so we can see what it is that's, you know, got everybody so, I don't know, adoring our Patrick? Oh, combing his hair there. He's absolutely gorgeous, isn't he? Can you smile for the cameras there, Patrick? So, well, how do you think he won the popular vote in Cockington? No, I think we've lost your signal. It's not good enough there. But if we can just see Patrick in his full glory, let's see. If we can just lift his head up. Absolutely. And we've also been joined. It's an absolute menagerie there. Ah, there you go. Well, look. As I said, I hope you've started a campaign to allow Patrick back there in the pub garden, as it were, to enjoy his pint. There he is. We're on board with your campaign. There he is. He stood up, hearing that GB News is supporting him, supporting his campaign, and let's get him back there in the local pub. Thank you both indeed very much for joining us. So, moving on to something completely different, hundreds of British war widows are calling on whoever becomes the next Prime Minister to right an historic wrong and reinstate their war widow pension. Until 2015, those whose partners died in active service were stripped of their pensions if they remarried. Although the law was changed 7 years ago, around 300 who had been married before were not included in the new scheme. Our Home and Security editor, Mark White, spoke exclusively to some of the widows who say they've been forgotten by a government that simply doesn't care.
He lived for flying. You marry somebody in the Air Force, you marry the military, and everything that comes with it.
Jude Howcroft's husband Bill was killed in a flying accident behind the controls of his RAF Tornado in 1998. In the months before his death, Jude recalls one particular conversation where her husband insisted if the worst ever happened, she had to try her best to move on with her life.
Bill actually sat me down and said, right, we need to have a conversation. Things do happen, you've seen it. And I want you to promise me that if you fall in love again, you don't hold back and you live your life
It'll be when they go to throw
for
the
me
bulletins,
and the kids.
Top of the hour.
7 years after Bill's death, Jude finally found love again and remarried. Official government policy meant she automatically lost her £7,000 annual war widows compensation payment.
But I have never stopped loving Bill. Ever. But the fact that I had to give up my pension, it was almost being judged that how dare I find love again. I clearly couldn't have loved my first husband. And it just makes me so angry.
In 2015, the government changed its policy, ensuring any war widow who remarried still received their war widow's pension. But hundreds who'd remarried before that date were not included. They are, they say, the forgotten widows.
What's wrong? It's immoral. It's discrimination. And the compensation, which is called the war widow's pension, is the only tangible link these individuals have to their late husband.
40 years after the death of her husband Ian aboard HMS Argonaut in the Falklands, and although Margaret Allen remarried, she is still profoundly affected by his loss. She met the then Chief Secretary to the Treasury, Liz Truss, in 2018, who promised to right a wrong, to ensure that war widows' pensions were restored. Margaret's now calling on the woman who may well be our next Prime Minister to make good on that promise.
I would ask her to stand by that statement and resolve this now. It's almost 7 years we have been campaigning to get this corrected. All we're asking for is parity with our peers. We've struggled, we've been traumatised and stressed for 7 years. Enough is enough.
We are the forgotten few. Our husbands paid the price, but that injustice remains. We're not asking for anything that isn't rightfully ours.
Well, thanks for joining us today. I've got some of your views here. You've been sending them in. Mohammed says the interest rate rise is ridiculous. If we expect inflation to rise to 15% by next year, people will spend more, not less, so they can buy more now and less later. It was a completely stupid decision by the Bank of England, as the government has a national debt also, and their own repayments will cost more. And Robert says, hi, any candidate endorsed by the EU or Kevin Maguire, I will choose the exact opposite. Maguire and the EU prefer Sunak, so that's a big plus for me to endorse Liz Truss. It's like the War of the Roses all over again. I liked the Tories, and I'm on the side of Truss, not on the side of Sunak, who's a wet. Well, thank you for your views. Thank you for joining me. You've been watching The Briefing with me, Esther McVeigh. I'll be back next week. But next, don't forget, you've got Mark Longhurst, who's doing On the Money, and he's got an expert panel talking about that interest rate rise.
Hello, I'm Alex Deakin with your latest weather updates. A fresher feel out there today. We've lost the humidity. Most places dry and bright with sunny spells, but there are a few showers across parts of the north. Low pressure way up to the north. High pressure that will be moving in over the next few days. Between the two, the breeze coming in from the northwest, so it's areas that are exposed to that breeze that are most likely to see a few showers across western Scotland, some for Northern Ireland, and one or two have been feeding in this morning across parts of northwest England. The odd one getting into Wales as well, and we'll keep a few going across northeastern Scotland through the day. But for most places, certainly from the Midlands, south and east, it's going to be dry.